The Journey of Meaning, Part 9. Why different cultures might set off on different journeys. Let's rewind back to the time before meaning does any travelling at all. People from different cultures describe the world in different ways. In English, we might talk about the road to recovery, while other cultures may speak about restoring balance or unblocking energy or returning to harmony. On a surface level, these differences are easy to explain due to the simple fact that different cultures have different traditions, histories, and ways of speaking. But what if the real difference begins much earlier? What if the differences are not so much in different ways of speaking, but in ways of seeing, and what is regarded as important and less important in a given culture? We established in earlier videos that before we can use a metaphor, we first need to agree on what the ordinary world looks like. We know that a stone is hard, that fire is hot, that honey is sweet, etc. We hardly notice these things because they are so obviously part and parcel of the object in question. But they are doing something very important. They are teaching us what to pay attention to out of all the other available features of the object. A stone, for example, isn't just hard, it's also heavy, it's cold, rough, smooth, it's grey, dense, dry. It has a texture, a temperature, and a geological history. And honey isn't just sweet, which is the prime feature that we pay attention to. It's also sticky, golden, thick, and fragrant. The point is that not all languages and cultures pay equal attention to all these characteristics. For some, other features are more salient, and this makes me wonder whether different cultures produce different metaphors chiefly because they first learned to notice different things about the same world. If this is true, then this is surely where differences between cultures begin, not in language or metaphor or ways of doing things, but in the ways they see things, the ordinary things that people notice, remember, and talk about every day. The significance of this, if true, extends far beyond language and linguistic curiosities and quirks about different uses of figurative language. This might help explain why patients describe illness differently, why some health messages work well in one culture but not in another, why translation is about much more than replacing words, and why artificial intelligence still struggles to communicate naturally across cultures. We don't notice everything about an object. Some things are less salient than others. We English speakers pay most attention to the fact that a river flows. That's the feature that is more salient to us. But a river is more than that. It also floods. It carries fish, reflects the sky, shapes the lands, marks borders, it freezes. It can be a source of drinking water, or a source of pollution, or a source of disease. I remember growing up by the River Wear in Sunderland when the shipyards and coal mines and heavy industry were still there. That river at that time was poison. A river can be calm or dangerous. It can be a source of food, transport and life. Or it can be a cause for conflict between countries. All of these things and more are entirely true. But we focus on the flow. And from there, we talk about the flow of time. The flow of ideas, the currents of opinion. Flow becomes the characteristic that keeps returning. And if we think about water more generally, we know that water can clean, nourish, destroy, adapt to any shape, and save lives. But different cultures have noticed different things about water. In Christianity, water often represents cleansing and new beginnings. In Taoism, it represents flexibility and strength. In the Sahel, water is life is a core cultural belief shared by many, if not all, ethnic groups in the region. In Tamashek, there's the phrase Aman Iman, water is the soul, or water is life, as popularized by the Tuareg band Dinariwen. And all this may be true, but water itself hasn't changed. Neither have its properties. Different peoples pay attention to different parts of it. A mountain can be an obstacle to overcome or a sacred place. Wind can represent change, breath or spirit. Fire can represent warmth or danger or purification. None of this thinking is wrong. So people create metaphors from objects that they know based on the characteristics that matter most in everyday life. So Before a culture can talk about the road to recovery or a storm of emotion or the flow of ideas, it was already decided, often without us realizing it, which parts of roads, storms and rivers are worth noticing in the first place. In other words, metaphors don't so much grow directly out of reality as they grow out of the parts of reality that people have learned to notice together. Every one of these features that become salient for specific cultures grows out of parts of everyday experience that people have found most important over many generations, and then this becomes inherited. If different cultures notice different things about the world, then it shouldn't surprise us that they also develop different metaphors. And if this idea is true, then it can help us understand something else. Patients don't invent their descriptions of illness from nothing either. They draw on the images that already exist in their language and culture. One person in one culture says that they are drowning in anxiety. Another from another culture says that their energy is blocked. Someone with depression may describe living in darkness, while someone else may talk about carrying a heavy weight about living with the same condition. A person with long COVID in one culture may describe living in a fog. Someone with fatigue may feel as though their batteries have run flat or they are walking through deep mud. The words and images differ, but they are trying to describe the exact same thing, to use the familiar to explain experience that cannot be seen. And this is why translation can be so difficult, because it's simply not enough to translate the words. You have to translate the experience behind them. And sometimes that means finding a completely different image that helps people arrive at the same understanding. This also applies to best practice in health communication. It should start with experiences people already recognize and use them to explain experiences that are much harder to see. All of this is just conjecture though. I started off a few videos wondering how far meaning can stretch or travel, how far we can use metaphor without the meaning collapsing in on itself, and then I considered the features of concrete objects that we use to anchor metaphor on. It was this that got me wondering about whether different cultures choose to focus on different features of the object. Unlike all the other articles and videos I've put together on meaning and metaphor that are based on what published literature says about the topic, this journey of meaning is based on no reading whatsoever. I wrote the script of this video on a whim, on holiday actually, on gut feeling, and I'm not saying that my ideas on this topic are right. But let's say it is true that cultures pay attention to different features of an object. We see stone as hard, but others may see a different feature of stone as more salient and worthy of attention. Then this has significant consequences for understanding language, cross-cultural miscommunication, and of course, healthcare and patient voice research. For example, when a patient says, "It feels like an elephant is sitting on my chest," the challenge for the researcher is not only to understand what the metaphor means, but why did this patient choose that imagery in the first place? And the answer to that may lie much deeper than the metaphor itself. It may lie in the patient's personal experiences, but that may be influenced by deeper sediment than everyday experience. It may be shaped by how the person understands the world on a deep cultural level. It may show us how an entire culture may view the world. And this also has consequences for medical translation. A phrase like brain fog works because everybody knows what it's like to struggle to see through fog. But any other language may not permit fog to be used in the same way. They might use a completely different image to describe the same experience. And some translators might try to shoehorn fog in that language and cultural worldview. And that's when resonance comes into play. A term may well be translated accurately, but if it doesn't resonate, then it doesn't mean anything. We need to be more metaphor aware because they may be trying to tell us something much deeper about how a particular person learned to understand illness in the first place. AI text generation in other languages has the same problem. LLMs can already translate between languages quite well and explain medical information, provide summaries and so on. But if it can only translate the words, then it may miss the experiences and worldviews that give those words their meaning. To communicate well across cultures, AI also needs to become more metaphor aware and move beyond simply dealing in vocabulary. It needs to learn how different communities see the ordinary world around them. And once we understand that, we might begin to understand why people describe illness in such different ways. And this is just as important as understanding the metaphors themselves. Perhaps that's the most important take from this thought piece. People from different cultures don't live in different realities because we all live in the same physical world. We just don't all notice the same things in the same objects. These differences begin long before we formulate our metaphors. They are the ordinary features of the world that we learn to pay attention to remember, and build our understanding around. And those small differences shape the stories we tell, the metaphors we use, and the ways we understand and articulate illness. And understanding how a person sees the world is the first step towards beginning to see the world through their eyes and beginning to gain deeper insights into their lived experiences. And sometimes there are things that are there in plain sight that we do not see. And we will explore an example of this in the next video and the last of this series. Thank you for listening. This was originally written by Mark Gibson, Kielder, United Kingdom, August 2026.